Well, after 3 years as an international pariah, Russia has been welcomed back to the international fold by the Americans. The top American and Russian diplomats held talks overnight about ending the war in Ukraine. Russia says it will not accept NATO peacekeeping forces on the ground in Ukraine. The US says there will need to be concessions on all sides for a deal to be struck. But many Ukrainians called the talks an insult because Volodymyr Zelenskyy was not invited to those talks.
In order to bring an end to any conflict, there has to be concessions made by all sides. We're not going to predetermine what those are. We're certainly not going to negotiate this today or in a press conference for that matter. But and there are other parties that have sanctions. The European Union is going to have to be at the table at some point because they have sanctions as well that have been imposed. So, but I guess the point here is the goal is, and we agreed on what the goal is to bring an end to this conflict in a way that's fair, enduring, sustainable, and acceptable to all parties involved.
Russia has reiterated one of its key demands is to cancel the promise of Ukraine gaining NATO membership.
The conversation was, I think, very useful. We did not just listen, but heard each other. And I have reason to believe that the American side has become more understanding of our position, which we have once again presented in detail.
Well, Sky's James Matthews has more now.
I speak to people in Donald Trump's orbit and they talk about ambitions for a thaw in US-Russia relations. He sees that as a priority in terms of reshaping the geopolitical structure generally. He sees it as central to his legacy also. But I think, not for the first time, the elephant in the room with regard to this meeting in Riyadh was the country that wasn't present. For all the assurances by a US Secretary of State, and we had that from Marco Rubio today, that Ukraine will be involved in talks over its future. There is precious little evidence of it. Kyiv, will take precious little encouragement from discussions that took place today. Consider that debrief from Russia's Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov. I have reason to believe the Americans have started to better understand our position. Does that mean, that phrase better understand, does that go beyond a position whereby Ukraine cedes territory and cedes all ambitions of joining NATO, because that's the ground already put up for grabs by the Americans? To hear Russia further reassured on that does nothing to enhance the notion that Ukraine and European allies will not be involved and will not be influential in all of this. Rubio spoke about creating a high-level team to support Ukraine peace talks, but there's every impression of a low-level priority for Kyiv's interest. He spoke about concessions having to be made on all sides. Doesn't square with Ukraine's starting point for negotiation, not that he's asked them. I think what we saw today, Mark, was a reinforcement of the shift, and it's a big shift in US-Russia relations. It will cause concern and uncertainty, of course, in European capitals about the shape it's all taking, where they fit in, and what confidence they can have in Donald Trump to preserve their interests.